Hey guys, Infidel1258 here. Today I'm going to share with you a clip from a recent YouTube live event wherein I had a chat with the Hoda, Elanor Bravefoot, the 0 mana legendary promo card. I make two main points and I want to unpack the value proposition of these cards and whether I'm buying them. And then secondly, the impact on game design that they reflect and point toward. I think it's a major shift in game design, card design, and this is noteworthy and important to mention. So those are the two big talking points that we're going to get into today. I hope that sounds interesting, and if it does, stick around. Let's leave it there. Thanks guys. Let's get into it. Permanently gain +1 range power for each allied 0 mana card from the Chaos Legion set. Royal Eagle says, Blasphemy of Uul description update. We received many questions regarding the description of that ability, so we're making some clarifications in our next release. We will update this ability's description. It currently says permanently gain 1 ranged power for each 0 mana card from the Chaos set. It will be updated to permanently gain 1 range for each allied card named Fiend. Interesting. That's cool. This ability will apply to all current 0 mana Fiend cards, which may include other card releases in the future. I really like that upgrade. That's really cool. This puts me on two different topics. So I have two talking points that I want to address on this topic, Hoda. Yeah, Hoda says, imagine if Elanor Bravefoot lost half of her ability in Modern when Chaos left Modern. That would be so bad. Absolutely. Yeah, that was a bit of an oversight. So that's a really logical tweak in design. There's two things I want to say about that. The first is, I haven't talked about these promo cards at all yet. And so I have opinions about them. And I guess I'll get into that. But then the second piece I want to talk about is game design and how this actually, to me, points in a really positive direction. Okay, so let's start with these cards. Now, these are the first of the promo release. There's going to be 4 more of these, I think. So 10 total promo cards. And I guess it'll be something like this, where there'll be a rare, maybe a common, maybe an epic, and then a legendary, I bet. Or maybe some of the releases will be rare, legendary, and some of them will be epic, common. I don't know. But regardless, we're going to see more cards like this over the next several weeks. In fact, very rapidly. It's going to see a lot of promo cards. To me, these cards, I don't know. I don't consider either of these particularly exciting. Cleanse is cool. This is the first kind of Cleanse rearguard that I've seen that's ever been released in the game. That's pretty interesting because you can use it in conjunction with taunts. Because so often with taunts, like you could put the Wave Brood in the back line, the Wave Brood, and it's a pretty strong card in a lot of contexts, especially now that we have archery from the first position, or sorry, the only card you can play is archery. That rule set makes this card more interesting. The reason I bring it up is this is an interesting card. I play it quite a bit. I like it. You probably use it a lot too. And this card gets better if you have a card like this, because it's playable on the blue team. It's an archery unit. It can provide the cleanse if your taunt monster is getting afflicted, and that should allow more resiliency, which might mean the difference between loss and victory. So I do like Sanctus Vicar, but I think, there's just no way I'm going to spend that much money on it. Like, to me, and we can go to the calculator to figure this out. Actually, let's pop over there. So Vicar is a card that sells for 3,000 credits per BCX or 3,000 DEC. So if we take the DEC figuration, we go 3,000 DEC per BCX, and it's a rare card, so you need 115 of them to get a max. Now you might say, I don't want a max. Well, I would want a max. And that makes it easier for me to give a frame of reference if I just kind of stick to that. So we're talking 345,000 DEC. And if we come in here and we find DEC, DEC is at 743. Okay, it's peaking up a little. And it's by 0.000743. Yeah, so it's $256 US to get a max copy of that card. And I would say Sanctus Vicar is not worth that kind of money. 256 to me is just not worth it. Now, That's 256 at the price point of 700 Splintoshis, right? 740 Splintoshis. You know, if you think that DEC can get back to peg, then you're spending DEC that will appreciate meaningfully. I think it'll get back to peg. Therefore, I consider my DEC to be worth more than that. So buying a card like this isn't $256. It's closer to $350. And I think I made an interesting argument for why it's probably valuable on the blue team. And I didn't mention that being archery, it lends itself to partnering with that summoner that I already showed you I like playing. The new Rebellion summoner that gives the tactics for archery damage output. I don't know if I would necessarily want this to be my, dropping 2 extra damage on that. But the reflection shield could be interesting because if there was a reflection coming at you, then you'd be more resilient. So it's a good card. And I didn't talk about the fire sort of connections or opportunities, but I think the bigger interesting plays are probably with the blue team anyways. So it's interesting, but I don't want it. And I'm definitely not spending $250 on that. If you go to the marketplace and spend $250 allowance, you could buy some crazy summoners. That's where I'd be looking. If I had $300 and burn into Splinterlands, it's definitely not Sanctus Vicar, even though it's an interesting card. Elanor Bravefoot, really cool actually. You get that strengthen, which is definitely important. For 0 mana, you're giving me a strengthen? That alone would be, if there was nothing else, I would like this card. For 0 mana and a strengthen, I would play that card. But then this is very interesting. 2 damage is interesting by itself. If this was 1 mana, I'd play this card. The Weary, of course, giving you some probability of becoming exhausted. But Weary, especially on a backline card, is not the biggest deal. In my experience using Weary cards already, they happen. They sometimes they will weary, but their advantage outweighs their detriment or their problem. So the abilities outweigh the disabilities. And so I think she's very strong. I think she's stronger than Sanctus Vicar. And I think being neutral means you partner with everything. I think this is much more a desirable card. But then still, we're looking at a serious price point, and especially with the upgrade that's coming, moving it away from Chaos Legion set, but all fiends. A multi-splinter summoner, and you can bring in at least 2 fiends. And so you could go from 2 to 4 damage output. And maybe if there's other fiends being brought in the future, you could imagine this being like a 6 output card or something crazy. Picture an equal opportunity rule set where everyone has 10 hit points, and you've got 4 fiends, Elanor Bravefoot, and 1 10 mana, 10 hit point monster. And then she'd have 6 damage output. So anyways, it's an interesting card. But again, price point, 50,000 DC. 50,000 DC times 11, 550,000 DC. So if you're looking at peg value, you're talking $550. Or you go 0.00075 and you're down to $400. Is that card worth $400? Is that card worth $250? If you come over to Peak Monster, you come in to buy. So Jotun has the $32 per BCX 4-week average, which means it's sold for less than that. This is $26 that it's sold per BCX. So times 11, you're talking $300 for a max Jotun. But that's a pretty big discount in 3 weeks to go from $26 to $40 per BCX. So Jotun is appreciating. Byzantine Kitty, I think it's the same deal. Let's find out. Over the last 4 weeks, the average has been $35, and we're currently selling for $190 on a low buy, or $68 on a per BCX. That's a doubling of the price. That's doubling. I personally saw it, I think for $250 or something like that, or $290 a month ago, sold for $22 per BCX, which would make it, if it was a max one, I don't know if it was a max one, would be $230 for a max kitty, which, by the way, today is going to cost you $1,800 US, because you can't buy a max kitty right now. Now, if you wanted to buy a level 3, you could get it for $70 per BCX. But you see my point, man. These cards are scarce. They're desirable. They're impactful. They're being overlooked because people feel salty about what has happened in the past. They're feeling like, oh, everyone's leaving, Axler and, Bulldog and, I know John and Jane, they're leaving too. It's like, Yeah, it's always been the case that there are going to be ups and downs in any cryptocurrency experience or space. Splinterlands has always been part of that conversation. Either you're here because you enjoy the process and you believe in the future, or not. It's so frustrating as somebody who talks about this and who thinks about it and who tries to help you guys think about it critically, to hear so many voices say the same general idea of sentiment scares me, I'm leaving. It's like, why was sentiment ever part of the conversation? You have to fight sentiment. Now, that doesn't mean, some of you think that means you should never sell, Dwayne. Dwayne just said, never, never, never sell. It's always going to fail, or it's always going to win. There's no chance of failure. No, nuance. There's a possibility of failure within Splinterlands, and yet there's reason to be hopeful for the future. And if you're hopeful for the future, the valuations of the assets should appreciate. Regardless of whether you're hopeful for the future or not, the way to determine your position should never be sentiment. It shouldn't be, what is the fear and greed index at today? Okay, I'm gonna sell now because the fear and greed index is low or high or whatever. That's looking toward like public sentiment. What are people saying? And it's like, what are you saying? What do you believe? Why do you believe that? Why is Splinterlands going to survive, or why is it going to die? Figure that out and then invest accordingly, and throw away the keys until something changes. Meaning, like if you buy into a game like this and you're enjoying the process, that's step one. That's the important part, because if you enjoy the process, you start to forget about the long-term investment and you don't care if you're making money. If you're just here for money, then you have to do this in an even bigger way, where you come to your fundamental consideration about what this game is and where it's going to go based on whatever calculations you make, and inputs that change that positively or negatively should be regularly considered. But absolutely, you need to fight against making sure that the inputs that are changing your opinion are not just sentiment. If SPS is at an all-time low and card valuations are at an all-time low and you're hearing people complain about how the game is dead, don't be surprised. That's sentiment shift. Don't let sentiment shift make your mind up for you. But if sentiment shifts because of a fundamental concern where Matt died and now the game is rudderless because there's no commander in chief, there's no leader with a vision, there's no, maybe Nate's gone or investigator leaves, or now we're talking about fundamental concerns that are pieces of data that should inform your opinion. One is logical rethinking of your prior idea, and the other is a non-logic, emotion-driven response. I hope you see that. That's super important that we draw that line in the sand. This is Future Dwayne. I'm checking in because I realized after the fact we were talking about these new promo cards, and I said that the two thoughts came to mind around them. One, the financial side, the cost, and I've just spent 12 minutes in this video explaining that. But the second piece I didn't go back to is the idea that, particularly with Bravefoot, Elanor Bravefoot, because of her blasphemy of Uul, which is being upgraded not to reflect Chaos Legion, but actually any fiend, this card partners with other fiends. That means this is the exact sort of game design, card design I was hoping for, and I previously called out in a different video where I talked about how the Rebellion Soulbound reward cards miss the mark in that they don't partner with the Rebellion core set. If they synergize really well, meaningfully, then you might argue that you would move more Rebellion packs because you create synergy, desirability, and probably follow-up purchase. And so with Blasphemy of Uul, what I'm seeing is there's a connection between this card's its effectiveness, its utility, and your access to fiends. But what about future? They're changing the language around this for a reason. They're changing it away from Chaos Legion set to any fiend because presumably they will release future fiends. That's almost certain, because otherwise Blasphemy of Uul, this ability, gets diminished after Chaos Legion rolls out of Modern, meaning this card Bravefoot become less effective after the fiends leave, unless we're getting new fiends. All that said, you're seeing, I think, maybe for the first time, an intentional, I called it a blood alliance in a YouTube short that I did recently, talking about card design, where two cards could be very similar and draw some sort of power from one another when they're played alongside one another. That's what I'm seeing here. So I want to give kudos to the team for thoughtful connectivity across, the history of the cards issued, as well as future planning to drive connectivity in the form of future fiends that will buff Bravefoot. So in conclusion, what I'm trying to say about these amazing promo cards is two things. The first big point is that the cost for these is just outside of my reach, and while I do think that they carry deep value, deep significance, they will impact the meta, and I would want to have them, I simply can't imagine spending so much money on them. It's just not possible. I mean, there's kitties and Yodens are within reach at that point. And then the second bit piece, Bravefoot is definitely drawing a huge connection with fiends that have come before and fiends that will come in the future, and that sort of connectivity is thoughtful, powerful, exciting, and interesting. It's new. We've never seen that sort of connectivity before. And I think if we grow that intentionality in terms of card design, but also game design, what you're going to end up finding is that people want to spend more money to chase after the same assets, because you get this retroactive buff maybe on the cards you already have. That's my thinking anyways. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. And by the way, if you want to be present when I record these live events, you can consider supporting the YouTube member channel. And if you do, you'll get access to members only content, including weekly live events that I do for the members. Check that out. Have an amazing day. God bless.